Good afternoon, spaceflight enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Bulletin. Today, we're going to be talking about sort of a controversial topic that I've wanted to be talking about for some time. I've wanted to create a video associated with this topic for a while, but things like 3i Atlas, things like exploding Starship boosters, those sorts of things always get in the way. But it's a question that I get asked all the time. It's comments that appear on my live streams all the time in regards to why have we had such a difficult time putting people back on the moon when we were able to do it more than half a century ago? Has NASA just become incompetent? Have they lost the right stuff? Or is it something else? Is it the fact that we never went to the moon in the first place? Is that actually true? And this is the proof here now, the fact that we are struggling to get to the moon because we never really went there in the first place. That's an argument that is very commonly made, and I'm going to talk about that briefly in this episode, but I already made a video about that topic some time ago. If you're interested in that, it's linked at the end of this video. But when it comes right down to it, the story of why we are struggling to get back to the moon right now, why it has taken so long, and why we continue to have such problems when we seem to have the right stuff in the old days, when less than a decade elapsed from the time that Kennedy said we should go to the moon, we should put people on the lunar surface and bring them back safely, an idea that he espoused that NASA had no idea how to accomplish, that we really didn't have the slightest idea how we were going to do that, and definitely didn't have the rockets or the technology, life support spacesuits, any of those sorts of things that were necessary for a moon landing simply didn't exist when Kennedy made his famous speech. And now that we've done it, theoretically, now that we know how to do it, for some reason, the task seems harder than ever. Well, it's a very long and complicated story that involves jobs, it involves politics, and it also involves trying to accomplish the same thing that we did in the 60s and early 70s with a lot less money, with reusing technology that was never designed to go to the moon, instead using technology that propelled the space shuttle into orbit, and somehow trying to adapt that technology to go to the moon instead of building the Saturn V all over again. And perhaps most importantly, it also concerns our objectives right now, what we are trying to do, the goal of establishing a permanent presence on the lunar surface, as opposed to just going there for 1-2 days, maybe 3 days at most, and then hightailing it back before our astronauts run out of air. That's the way things were with Apollo, and that can't happen with Artemis. That can't happen with a long-term stay on the lunar surface and things like a lunar base. So all of those things combined are contributing to make this journey a lot more difficult than maybe it should be. We're going to cover all of those things right now. One of the things that makes SpaceX such a successful organization is the fact that they bring everything in-house and consolidate all of the manufacturing, administration, pretty much everything is done in the same location. As far as Falcon 9s are concerned, everything is done in California. As far as Starship is concerned, everything is done in Texas. However, if you want to build something for the government, it better benefit as many different states as possible in order to maximize the numbers of jobs that it creates in those various states. And SLS is a perfect example of how rockets are built for NASA. You have the core stage being built and assembled in Louisiana at the Michoud manufacturing facility. I've never been able to pronounce that properly, but in any event, it's built in Louisiana. And then after that, the RS-25 5 engines for this core stage are tested in Mississippi at the Stennis Test Facility. At the same time, you have solid rocket boosters being built and tested in Utah. Okay, so that means you've got jobs being created in Utah, Louisiana, and Mississippi, all for the same rocket, and then the rocket is shipped to and delivered to Florida, where it is launched from Cape Canaveral. 4 states, 8 senators, all highly incented to make sure that the same project that created all of those jobs in their states for decades with the space shuttle industry, because keep in mind, all of these different components were also assembled for the space shuttle in the same locations. Well, they are incented to keep those jobs, to keep all of that manufacturing in their states. And 8 senators creates a very powerful voting bloc. And by the way, they're not the only people who are involved in the manufacture and construction of the SLS rocket. And by the way, this was the case with Saturn V as well. So when NASA got the word that they were going to need to build a new super rocket, although what purpose it was supposed to be used for always changed over time. As I mentioned in previous videos, originally the Orion was supposed to visit nearby asteroids, not the moon, but nevertheless, a super rocket was going to be needed. The idea was to use existing technology that we had been using for decades. It seemed like a great idea at the time. After all, the solid rocket boosters and the RS-25 engines, indeed the entire shuttle propulsion system, had never actually failed. Now, of course, somebody's going to point out that yes, indeed, a solid rocket booster did fail because of a little thing called an O-ring, but the thing of it is, the SRB actually performed as designed, and the engineers at Morton Thiokol were screaming at NASA a few hours before Challenger lifted off on that fateful day, telling them that the SRBs for the space shuttle were not designed to be used in cold temperatures that were very cold indeed the morning that the shuttle lifted off. So really, when it comes down to it, the SRBs and the RS-25s, the entire propulsion system never really experienced any kind of failure in flight, except when they were used under circumstances that they weren't supposed to be used in. So when it comes right down to it, these were pretty damn good engines. The RS-25 engines never experienced a failure, not once. And the Saturn V F1 engines, they had 1 or 2 hiccups in flight, actually. So it seemed like this was a pretty good idea. Use these highly reliable existing engines, all of this existing technology, and we should be able to build a super rocket for a lot less money and a lot quicker. But that's not how it worked out, as we all know. And it's not because there was some sort of huge problem with the technology. It was just a problem with the implementation. And everything ended up costing a lot more, and it's very much in the interest of the contractors involved and all of the jobs that they're creating for all of this stuff to take a lot longer than it was originally intended to do, especially when you have something called cost plus contracts. In other words, contracts that are supposed to cost one amount of money and end up costing a whole lot more without there being any significant penalties. Fixed cost contracts are a lot more common these days. They weren't really common during the time of the SLS. So the SLS had all kinds of issues that led to exploding costs and a lot of missed deadlines. A lot of missed deadlines that led a rocket that was supposed to launch well before 2020 to carrying out its first unmanned mission in 2022. Now, fortunately, all of that seems to be behind us now. We have a very functional super rocket that's capable of carrying a human-rated spacecraft out to lunar orbit, so all of that's taken care of. So why can we still not land on the moon? Well, the whole reason that that became a problem is because Artemis was supposed to accomplish something that Apollo did not. All right, so we've covered the politics. We've covered the challenges of trying to use space shuttle technology to reach the moon. But what are the other challenges? Is it just pure ineptitude, or is it just trying to slam round pegs into square holes, or whatever you want to call it, trying to use space shuttle technology for what it wasn't designed to do? And politics, job markets, the SLS being essentially a job creation machine, are those all of the culprits here? And we would be able to get to the moon easily if it wasn't for all of that? Well, there's something else to consider as well, and that is what we are trying to accomplish this time, which we didn't try to accomplish in the Apollo era. In the time of Apollo, we never established a permanent presence on the lunar surface. Indeed, we never stayed on the lunar surface for more than 3 days before we had to make our way back to Earth before life support ran out. These days, it's a lot more ambitious. Even Artemis 3 is going to be staying on the lunar surface for a whole week at least, and will be in transit doing a variety of things associated with the mission for almost a month. And that's just the start of it.
And here we go. 10.
Two quick house cleaning items. Number one, I'm not going to show you the full duration of this incredible video. Artemis 1, a cinematic experience from Digital Astronaut. If you want to check that out, I have it linked in the description. Man, this thing is incredible. Number two, just a quick correction on something that I did yesterday. I reported that an FAA investigation would be necessary because of the SpaceX Super Heavy booster malfunction, or the implosion that took place. Since it wasn't a flight test, the FAA is not involved, so no FAA investigation will be required. And by the way, the FAA informed me about that yesterday, so I need to make sure that I clean up that particular error. All that having been said, is Artemis simply incapable of landing on the moon the way Apollo did because the equipment and the technology isn't good enough? We're trying to use space shuttle technology to do something that it really wasn't designed to do because of greed, because of job creation, because of corruption. Is that the entire culprit in the matter? Well, no. It's also because we're trying to do something that Apollo didn't and couldn't do. Artemis has a very simple but ambitious objective, and that is to establish a permanent presence on the lunar surface, a lunar base, if you will. Apollo's objective was to get humans to the surface of the moon and get them back safely. That was it. The whole idea of building a moon base and more ambitious plans came later and would have required a hell of a lot more money. So in order to establish this permanent presence, NASA decided, number one, they needed to build a lunar space station, also known as the Lunar Gateway, that it would be better to have an orbiting presence capable of supporting this lunar base from orbit rather than having all of the support, all of the supplies, all of the emergency evacuation capabilities way back on Earth. That was one reason to have the space station. There were others. They also wanted to set up sort of a training ground for interplanetary journeys in lunar orbit. A lunar space station is very similar to the experience that astronauts will have while traveling between Earth and Mars, simply because you're in interplanetary space, meaning that you soak up a lot more radiation there. Therefore, you need to learn how to make radiation shielding a reality. So, for a variety of different reasons, NASA wanted a lunar space station. Therefore, the only thing Orion had to do, that is to say, the capsule, the replacement for the Apollo capsule, was get to that space station. Not get all the way to low lunar orbit, just get to the space station, which is in what's called a near rectilinear halo orbit. Therefore, you can deliver a lot more cargo and also a little bit more in the way of personnel to a lunar space station if you don't have to get it all the way down to low lunar orbit. Therefore, Orion can deliver 4 people instead of 3. It can have a much more robust life support system. It's also 50% larger in terms of habitable volume. If you're talking about a bigger spaceship with a more robust life support system and the capability of handling 4 astronauts versus 3, the Saturn V couldn't have delivered that all the way to the moon either. Now, another advantage that SLS has, at least theoretically, over the Saturn V is you can modify it a lot easier. Saturn V essentially maxed out at the design that it was created for. If you wanted to send a lot more cargo or a lot more personnel out to the moon, you essentially needed another rocket, sort of a super Saturn V with a lot more than 5 F1 engines, or perhaps with strap-on solid rocket boosters. That would require a lot of modifications, a lot of additional engineering and fabrication, and a hell of a lot more money. The SLS Block 1B, which will come out for Artemis 4, at least in theory, and it's already funded to do that, has an improved capability because of its Exploration Upper Stage, or EUS. This has 4 RL-10 engines instead of just 1. It has a lot more propellant and therefore capable of carrying a lot more cargo, again, out to that near rectilinear halo orbit. The SLS Block 1 can only carry about 27 metric tons all the way out to the moon, whereas the Block 1B can carry 38 metric tons. What that means is it can carry the Orion capsule plus 11 tons worth of cargo all the way out to lunar orbit. That's something that Apollo couldn't do either. That means that you can deliver space station modules, or perhaps modules that will be used eventually for a lunar base. 11 tons can carry a lot of payload. You can put some very substantial space station modules or habitation modules for a base, those sorts of things, into an additional 11 tons. And again, all that can be delivered on the same rocket because of the Exploration Upper Stage and also something called the Universal Stage Adapter, or USA, that's currently being built at Dynetics. I had an opportunity to see this thing, by the way. It's absolutely huge. So the idea is you can carry both the Orion and the astronauts and a lot of cargo out to lunar orbit all in the same mission. This is something that Apollo couldn't do without a huge upgrade to Saturn V. But of course, as we all know, something that Apollo could do that SLS cannot is deliver astronauts all the way down to low lunar orbit and then down to the surface of the moon. SLS and Orion do not have the capability of doing that, mostly because Orion is a lot heavier than the Apollo capsule was, and it's just simply not practical to deliver it all the way to low lunar orbit and also to attach a lunar lander to it. And also, any lunar lander that you want to use for Artemis needs to be a lot bigger than the Apollo LEM. The LEM could only carry 2 people plus a few hundred kilograms worth of equipment and perhaps could haul up a couple hundred kilograms worth of moon rocks. That's it. Your lunar lander for this kind of mission for Artemis needs to be a lot more robust, a lot more ambitious, and you can't put a big lunar lander and a crew capsule onto the same rocket, at least not with the kind of technology and rockets that were available or were being designed at the time that Artemis got started. In theory, Starship could do it, but here's the problem with Starship, and this remains a problem to this very day. Yes, Starship can haul 100 tons all the way out to lunar orbit, but in order to do that, it has to completely refuel in low Earth orbit. 1,200 to 1,300 tons worth of propellant and oxidizer, all in low Earth orbit, because the rocket is completely empty or close to empty by the time it gets to orbit. Why? Because it's so big and it's so heavy. It's carrying this massive amount of payload out to the moon, and even when it's empty, it's gigantic and made of stainless steel on top of that, which makes it much, much heavier than anything we've ever tried to send out to the moon before, and it requires 100% refueling before it can make that journey out to the moon. And we can only carry about 100 tons at a time worth of propellant and oxidizer up to orbit, meaning that it takes at least 10 and maybe even more refueling missions to get Starship completely refueled. So what SLS can do in one mission, Starship requires at least 11 to 12 launches and perhaps even more of the biggest rocket in human history. Yes, Starship delivers a lot more payload, but if you launched 12 SLSs, you would get way more payload out to the moon than Starship could ever manage. The difference, of course, is expense. Starship, at least theoretically, is a lot less expensive than SLS because of its reusability. Still, all of that remains theoretical. Still going to be a considerable amount of time before Starship is ready to handle the entire mission, meaning that we have to go with what we have right now, which is an SLS plus some kind of lunar lander to get the job done. More complicated than Apollo, but capable of delivering more people and more cargo to the lunar surface than Apollo, which is what is necessary if you want to build a lunar base. So if we just wanted to duplicate what Apollo did, put flags and footprints on the lunar surface and then just go home and not try to do anything more ambitious, by now, I think we probably could have done it even with the incompetence involved with SLS and everything that's gone wrong with it so far. I'm pretty confident that if that's all we wanted to do, we probably could have done it by now. But we're trying to do something a lot more complicated with technology that wasn't designed for it, and we're trying to do it on a shoestring budget compared to what Apollo had at the time. So as much as we would like to think, or as tempting as it is to think that NASA is just inept these days, doesn't have the right stuff anymore, we don't have intelligent people at NASA anymore, those sorts of things, or as much as we might like to think that the whole thing was a conspiracy and a fraud and we never landed on the moon in the first place, and that's why it's so difficult, really, when it comes down to it, there were quite a number of factors that have made this whole Artemis program a very, very difficult thing to do. We're trying to get back to the moon on a shoestring budget. We're trying to get back to the moon utilizing technology that wasn't designed to really get us to the moon in the first place, and we're trying to do something much more ambitious than Apollo ever did. If Apollo wanted to establish a permanent presence on the moon, a lunar base or whatever, it would have cost an insane amount of money. It would have required mega rockets that made Saturn V look like a pop bottle rocket by comparison. And yes, NASA had very clear plans to do all of those things, and the US government decided they didn't want to pay the price tag, and they wouldn't pay that price tag today either. That being the case, NASA has tried, and in many cases kind of failed, to do this on the cheap, to do it with existing engines, with existing solid rocket boosters, boosters with existing technology without having to reinvent the wheel, and yet it still turned out to be an incredibly expensive endeavor that's taken a lot longer than we ever thought. And we have also tried to implement or integrate Starship into the whole thing, which I think in the long run is a very good idea. But if we want to get to the moon this decade, turns out that it's far more complicated and far more difficult than we ever thought. It's probably not going to be able to get the job done. All of these things combined have made Artemis quite the shit show on many different levels. That being the case, though, in early 2026, we are looking at maybe 2-3 months from now, Artemis 2 is going to lift off, or at least that's the current plan. It will orbit the moon. It will carry 4 astronauts to lunar orbit, something that no Apollo mission ever did. The most they ever did was 3. Apollo was simply incapable of carrying any more. And the Orion spacecraft will also travel further away from the Earth than Apollo ever did, in a higher orbit. Many milestones will be accomplished during this mission, but really, as I've mentioned many times, it is the HLS program that still remains as the biggest Achilles heel to this program. And as we've seen over and over again, the decision to go with Starship, although very good, I think, for the long run, very good if we want to build a lunar city or a big lunar base that has dozens of personnel and requires hundreds of tons of equipment and supplies to keep running. Eventually, Starship is going to be the solution for this base. But right now, I think we need something simpler, something that's just going to get us there, something that might be a little bit more like Apollo than we wanted to do at this point. Hopefully, that's something that works out for us. Hopefully, we can make this second solution work quickly before 2030 and at least stand a chance of beating China to the moon, who have their own plans that seem to be going very, very well. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. Pick up a piece of merchandise. The merch store will close on Cyber Monday. That's the Monday after Black Friday. Make sure to, if you want merchandise anyway, to grab a hold of it, because the store will be closing for a while. Might reopen just before Christmas. Not sure about that yet. Thanks again, and until next time, stay angry about space.